Hi, my name is Elena Maddie. I'm a singer, songwriter, and producer, and today I wanted to talk to you about how I loop vocals with Ableton. I'm gonna start and talk about the tools that I use. I have the push-to controller, but I don't use that for my vocal loops at all. The reason being that there's no good integration with the loop plugin in Ableton with the push-to. In order to kind of do what I want it to do, I would have to switch it into user mode, which is something that I don't do very often. That is totally an option if you have the push-to and you don't want to use any other controllers to control your vocal loops. I've used a couple of different devices, one of which was the Akai LPD8. I think this is the most affordable option. It has enough pads and also enough dials to kind of do everything that I needed it to do. In a very similar vein, I also have the Akai Mpk Mini. It does exactly the same thing as the LPD, except that it also has a keyboard. So this is a great little MIDI controller if you want something that's going to be a little bit more flexible, but if you're looking for just programmable pads, this one is fantastic. I've recently acquired the Arturia Keylab Mark II, which also has 16 pads on it. So I'm now no longer using these kind of desktop controllers. I'm using the controller that's on my keyboard, but it's all the exact same. Even like the arrangement and the way that I've organized the pads is exactly the same. So all of that being said, let's pop into Ableton. Okay, so here we are in Ableton, and the first thing we're gonna do, we're gonna hit Control-Alt-T, which creates a return track. So a return track takes audio from any of your other audio input tracks or MIDI input tracks, and it sends that audio or copy of that audio to this return track, which then also sends that audio to the master. On our return track, we are going to go to audio effects, delay and loop, and we're just gonna drag the looper plugin directly onto that audio track. So this is where things can get a little bit finicky. You wanna make sure that you have your input set to never. And the reason is, if you have that turned on, if you are monitoring through there, then you will always hear a duplicated voice, because when you're sending your voice to this looper channel, it's going to create a duplicate signal, which can create phasing or just extra vocal volume, which you don't want. So you want to make sure that that is set to never. The next thing you want to do is set this to follow song tempo. And this one is kind of up to you. If you want the song to start when you start recording a vocal loop, you can turn this on. I usually just leave it on, it doesn't really matter. And then my quantization is global. This is going to mean that this looper plugin is going to react the same way that the rest of my loops do. So I always have my loop set to start the following bar. So this way I'm not pressing the button and it's immediately recording. If that is something that you want to happen, you want to, kind of have a free loop situation that's not affected by the metronome or any of the rest of your song, you can go into the quantization menu and select none. And what that means is that it's going to start as soon as you press that record button. You would also want to set your tempo control to be none as well if you don't want it to be following your song's tempo. So now that we have the looper plugin kind of set up and ready to go, it's time to program it to whatever MIDI device you want to use. I will also preface this by saying you don't have to program it to an external MIDI device. You can also program it to keys on like a computer keyboard if that's something that's easier for you, or you can always just click with your mouse. I'm going to show you visually on this Akai LPD8, but I'm actually going to be pressing the buttons on my Keylab. So up in the top right-hand corner of Ableton, there's this button that says MIDI. You're going to click that. Everything turns blue, and you also get this nice list of all of your MIDI mappings. The buttons that are the most important down here are the plus button, the play button, the stop button, and the clear button. Most MIDI controllers have rows of 4 pads, and so I found for myself that it made the most sense to use these 4 buttons. The plus works essentially the same as the record button. It's going to start your recording for you. And within your looper plugin, you can see that it's going to record X number of bars, we're going to talk about that in a minute, and then continue to add on top of that. But you can change this function to be record and then play, or record and then stop, whatever suits your needs the best. For now, we're gonna click this plus button on the looper, and then you wanna click your coordinating button on your MIDI controllers. It would be this one on the Akai, or I'm gonna click this, and you can see that now there is a number there that lines up with whatever you've clicked on your MIDI controller, and it also shows up in the MIDI mapping. So I'm just gonna go straight across and do the same thing. I know that some people enjoy having the undo button. I don't really use the undo button very often, for better or for worse. Okay, now that we've got our MIDI controller programmed, we've got the looper plugin itself all set up, it's time to actually record some vocal loops. So over here, you can see that I have the looper plugin on return track C. So over on my vocal track, I'm gonna take the C send knob and I'm going to turn it all the way up to 100%. Now you can put this on any of your tracks that you want. It doesn't just have to be voice. Understand that you're sending 100% of that signal to your looper plugin. So this is gonna include any of the plugins that you have. So make sure that you're okay with sending all of that over to be looped. All right, let's record a little something to this looper plugin now. In order to do that, we are going to press whatever button you have programmed the plus sign to. Because we have it set to X bars, we're not going to record a certain set number of bars. It's going to be up to you to press that button again when you want it to stop. You want to make sure that this is going to match up to the rest of your song. If you're doing a 4-bar loop for the rest of your loops, make sure you're hitting that before that 5th bar starts. Otherwise, your timing is going to be all off. If you would rather have it work the same way as the rest of your loops, you can always set it to record a certain number of bars. I like having a little bit more flexibility. Sometimes I want my vocal loops to be really long. Sometimes I want them to be shorter than what the rest of my loops are doing. So I prefer to leave it to X bars. It just means you're going to have to press plus, and then when you're ready for it to loop, you're going to press plus again. So let's go ahead and loop some vocals. I'm going to turn on my metronome, which you can't hear, but I can hear. You're welcome. And we're going to press that plus button. You're going to see it's going to start recording down here. When I was satisfied with that loop, I pressed the green play button. You saw that it turned orange. You could also have pressed stop to stop the loop, or pressed clear to clear the entire loop. If you clear by accident, you can always go into the plugin, hit undo, and it'll bring back exactly what you had before. Those are the basics. You could go from there and loop vocals, loop instruments, whatever it is that you'd like to, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about some little tricks and tips that I use to make my vocal loop sound a little bit better. So the one thing that I do on whatever controller I'm using is I like to have a different amount of reverb on my vocal loops than on my actual loops. Sometimes it's nice if you're recording, a more choral section or something that's meant to be in the background, to kind of have it just be really atmospheric and kind of drowning in reverb more so than you would want your actual voice to. So if you take a look on your send track, you also have sends to send to your reverb and delay channels in Ableton. They're probably going to be deactivated by default. You just have to right click and hit enable all sends. They'll turn blue, and then you can send your reverb to whatever you like. I always program the 2 knobs that are beside these pads to control the volume and reverb of my vocal loops. You could program to be whatever if you wanted to have delay or a phaser or any sort of other effects on your vocal loops. You can add those to the knobs, and they program exactly the same way that we program the other pads. So you would go up, press the MIDI button, click on whatever the send is that you want to program, and then you would turn the knob. Obviously it's not going to work because this is not plugged in, but if I were to move this slider on my piano, you can see that now it is attached to that send. Turn off MIDI, and when I move this slider, now the MIDI send moves with it as well. This is great for playing live or live streaming when you want to kind of change things up on the fly and it's not something that you want to have set up in advance, or maybe you want it to be different for each song. And you can do the same thing for the volume slider, is decide which kind of knob you want to have it on, spin that, it'll change the number here, and now you've got even more control over your vocal loops. Something else that I've been doing recently is adding a little bit of movement to my vocal loops, for which I've been using a free plugin called HYTP2. The way that I have this window capture set up, it won't let me show you the actual settings in that, so I'm going to save that for another video. But if there are any other effects, distortion, panning, anything that you want to add to your vocal loops, you can always just drag that into your vocal loop channel and then adjust your settings. And it won't affect your main voice or your main instrument, it's only going to affect your vocal loops. And that's it. That is how I loop my vocals using Ableton, probably in way more detail than you needed. If you have any questions, I am constantly live on Twitch streaming music, and I love answering questions if you come into chat. That's probably the fastest way. Also, feel free to leave a comment down below if there's another video that you'd like me to make to dive a little bit more into something else in my setup. I want to do more of these kind of tutorial types of videos on like a micro level. So please let me know if there's something that you're interested in learning about. And until then, I will see you next time. Bye.